The first light spread like a hush over the maze, and Blessing's voice rose with it, clear, bright, and unafraid. She sang the hymn her mother loved, weaving Chichewa phrases through the dew and birdsong. The stalks swayed as if the field itself knew her melody. A few rows away a guitar answered. A gentle brush, then a confident chord. Blessing paused, startled, then laughed under her breath. Whoever it was, they'd listen long enough to know her key. Daniel stepped into the corridor of green, a little breathless, dust on his jeans and a shy grin tugging one corner of his mouth. "Again?" he asked. Blessing nodded, and their music braided in the soft morning air, two threads swiftly becoming one rope. They met at the edge of the field where the soil turned to footpath, introducing themselves with the awkwardness of people who had already shared a secret. Blessing adjusted her chitenge wrap and studied the guitar's scuffed body. Daniel traced a crack in the varnish as if it told his whole story. "Your voice knows the sun," he said, surprising himself. Blessing flushed, then teased him about the poet in his pocket. They laughed, and the silence that followed felt warm, not empty. He played a tune his father used to hum while shelling maize. She threaded harmonies through it until the world seemed to tilt. When they finally parted for school, it felt like stepping out of a dream and into bright, ordinary day. Word drifted across campus that a girl from the fields and a boy with a battered guitar were singing together before first bell. Some came to mock, most came to watch, but everyone stayed. The head teacher listened from the veranda, arms folded, a soft smile hidden in his sternness. Blessing led with a lullaby, Daniel stitched in finger-picked patterns. Their classmates swayed, shoulders brushing, test anxiety loosening like old rope. A boy in the back wiped his eyes and pretended to yawn. When the final note hung and broke, the schoolyard erupted, not wild but wholehearted. Blessing and Daniel stared at each other, dazed as if they'd stumbled into a door that hadn't been there yesterday. They tried the market next, standing between baskets of tomatoes and pyramids of mangoes. Sellers called prices in the pauses between verses. Children gathered with sticky fingers and unblinking focus. The air smelled of smoke, citrus, and rain on dust. Daniel's guitar danced. Blessing's voice lifted and softened, a hand on a shoulder, a promise in a crowded place. She sang an old fisherman's song. He answered with a rhythm that sounded like paddles tapping the lake. A baby clapped offbeat. Everyone laughed. Coins clinked into an enamel cup, but the true currency was the way faces changed, creased with surprise, then smoothed by recognition, as if the music had found something people had misplaced inside themselves. A man in a faded station t-shirt lingered by the chilly stall, his red headphones around his neck. After 2 songs he stepped forward, introduced himself as Laksun from River Breeze FM, and asked if they'd ever been on air. Blessing's heart slammed, sudden as thunder. Daniel blinked, then shifted his guitar, nervous and proud at once. Laksun explained the Sunday show. Local talent, live, no backing tracks, just truth. They were to come at dawn next week, he said, because the lake wind sounded beautiful through the open studio window at that hour. Blessing felt Daniel's fingers brush hers, barely, and the touch rang like a bell. The studio was smaller than Blessing imagined. Egg cartons on the wall, a single mic like a moonflower on a stem, and the window open to Lake Malawi's silver breath. Laksun counted them in with 2 taps on the desk. Daniel began, his hands steady now, the guitar bright as morning water. Blessing closed her eyes and sang the fields into the room, soil, sun, and the ache of hope. The mic held everything without judgment. When they finished, the call-in line lit like fireflies. "Ndikumva ngati ndabwera kanyumba," one listener said, "I feel like I have come home." Blessing pressed her hand to her chest and let herself believe just a little. Fame in a small place is a pebble tossed in a bowl. Waves reached school, church, distant relatives with opinions. Blessing's mother smiled but watched the clock. Daniel's uncle asked about money before asking if they'd eaten. Homework grew heavy, rehearsals needed time needed permission. Daniel took extra shifts unloading sacks at the mill, his wrists throbbing at night. Blessing helped her mother pound maize by lantern light, humming new melodies into the mortar's thud. They found solace in the field where it started, singing softly between rows, breath merging with wind. Sometimes, when their shoulders leaned together, it felt like a promise. Sometimes it felt like a question. A promoter from Blantyre sent an email Laksun read aloud. 3 shows, real pay, new audiences. But there was a twist tucked in the compliments. The promoter wanted a cleaner, poppier sound. He asked if Blessing would consider singing solo with a backing track, for polish. The room chilled. Daniel's smile didn't falter, but his eyes did. Blessing stared at the screen until the words blurred, feeling both chosen and betrayed by the same sentence. Laksun said no decision had to be final. Success tests a heart, he murmured, adjusting his red headphones. Blessing heard the test beat between her ribs like a second pulse. Another letter arrived, this one for Daniel. A community arts program in Lilongwe offered a 3-month mentorship for guitarists. Housing, workshops, mentors from South Africa. The dates overlapped with the Blantyre shows. They sat by the lakeshore at dusk, watching fishermen set lanterns on the water like bright seeds. Blessing traced circles on the sand. Daniel plucked at the guitar without sound, chords forming only in his hands. If I go, he said, I become better for us. Blessing nodded. If I take the shows, I build a stage for us. The us in both sentences trembled. Strong word, fragile bridge. They didn't plan the kiss, it fell on them like rain breaks a heat wave. After rehearsal, after a moment of silence that felt like holding your breath underwater, Blessing stepped forward and Daniel met her halfway. It wasn't frantic. It was certain, slow as a vow, soft as maize silk. Their hands found steady places. His at the back of her neck, hers splayed against his chest where his heartbeat thudded like a drum. When they pulled apart, the room smelled of dust, sweat, and something newly opened. They laughed, startled by joy, and then grew quiet, because joy had handed them a sharper, kinder kind of courage. They decided at night because daytime kept interrupting. Blessing's mother listened, stirring Sima with a firm arm. A song is only beautiful when the parts respect each other, she said. Do not let fear sing the loudest part. Daniel's uncle said opportunity doesn't knock twice and sometimes forgets your name the first time. He clasped Daniel's shoulder in a brief, fierce grip that said more than his words. Blessing and Daniel met in the field and spoke without music. She would take the Blantyre shows with one condition, a live guitarist, not a backing track. He would go to Lilongwe if the program agreed to let him perform at least once with her. They wrote the emails with hands that shook. The days that followed stretched and threaded like a loom. Blessing learned stagecraft, how to breathe through nerves, how to let the microphone be a friend. She wrote a setlist that started in the fields and climbed toward the city without losing its dirt. In Lilongwe, Daniel's fingers toughened. He learned to make a guitar sigh, shout, and whisper. A mentor taught him to leave air around a note so the singer has space to bloom. At night he put those spaces aside and filled the hostel with melodies that carried Blessing's name. They called it odd hours, connection crackling, voices catching when the silence between sentences got too heavy. Love, it turned out, had to learn a different time signature. Blessing's first Blantyre show sold out. Laksun opened with his velvet radio voice, then melted into the wings. The lights were warm, the crowd breathed in one animal rhythm. Blessing stepped forward, palms sweating, spine strong. She sang the hymn from the maize, then a new song about a guitar she could feel even when it wasn't there. In the third row sat a promoter with sharp eyes, and an empty seat beside him. Hundreds of kilometers away, Daniel took his place in a dim practice room, the same hour marked by different clocks. He played along to the memory of her setlist, and somewhere between two chords his hands stopped shaking forever. The program kept its promise, one night off and a bus ticket. Daniel arrived an hour before Blessing's second show, dust in his hair, grin cutting his fatigue in half. They didn't say much. They tuned quietly, the kind of speaking only musicians hear. When the spotlight found them both, the audience made a sound that was half cheer, half relief. Daniel set a rhythm that felt like heart and heel. Blessing poured a melody over it like water that had found its path. They ended with a new duet, voices crossing, settling and lifting again. The promoter with sharp eyes stood and clapped longest, as if he'd just remembered what he'd forgotten. The offers that followed were different, written for a duo respectful of the soil they came from. A small tour, a studio session with windows that opened to real air, time carved for study and for home. None of it was easy, all of it was theirs. On their last morning before the tour, they returned to the maize. The dawn was as it had always been, patient, generous. Blessing sang the first line she ever sang, and Daniel answered with the guitar's reply. Between them flowed the river of every hour they had chosen each other. When they kissed goodbye to the field, it felt less like leaving and more like carrying. Success would take them places, yes, but the music, the love, and the morning would always know their names.